world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
A trigger warning for today's episode. We will be discussing subjects around mental health, suicide, and gun violence. Please do protect yourself. Welcome to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are so happy you joined us today. Today, we are speaking with Melanie Gareau, a teacher turned writer from Bellevue, Saskatchewan, who has written a beautiful book for teens called Why Me, What Now?, which she says is like having your most understanding friend by your side. It's all about real stories and practical advice to help them tackle the challenges of growing up. And we sure love that. So welcome, Melanie, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here.
Yeah, so Marci and I, we've been doing this for, I don't know, like a few months now, 4 or 5 months. So we're getting
Close
our
to 6, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So we're just,
maybe 5.
We're kind of getting our sea legs, under us. And through this process, we've learned how to get introduced to all of these people from all around the country. And in fact, today with Melanie, we have our first Canadian. So we're super excited about that. And Marci might get to practice her French a little bit today. We'll see about that. But
hopefully that's it. Just the last name, because I don't have much more that I've retained.
But we are super excited to have you. As Marci mentioned, Melanie has written a wonderful book, and that's why Marci and I have chosen to have this conversation with Melanie. It is around a very deep and difficult discussion. As you all know, Marci and I do a lot of work around suicide, and this is the holiday season, and we know this is a very difficult time for a lot of people right now. So, Melanie, without further ado, we are going to let you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to write the book.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. So yeah, I am Canadian, French Canadian. I live in the prairies in Saskatchewan, and I like to. At this time of year, I talk a lot about how cold it is outside, but we've had such beautiful weather. We don't have snow I don't remember the last time we haven't had snow in the month of November. So this is really cool.
Climate change.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks some climate change for those in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I did write a book, and it was a book that was born out of tragedy, unfortunately. I was a teacher, a young teacher in 2015, and on a random Wednesday in the month of March, I went to school early. I always went to school early to prep my day, and I noticed a student had arrived and parked right outside my classroom window. And I thought it was kind of strange that he was there so early, but his mom worked in the school, so I thought maybe he was there to help his mom with something. I continued to do my work. I had my back turned to the window, and I suddenly heard a loud sound. It sounded like someone had thrown a snowball into my window. So I turned around. I didn't see anything, but later on, I discovered, not too long after, about a minute later, I discovered that this young man had taken his life just outside the school, and the sound I had heard was the gunshot. What happened after that was really, it was almost like I was watching myself in a movie.
Mm.
Everything slowed down, but also seemed to be going very fast at the same time. I was there when the mother of this student found out what had happened.
Oh.
And then buses full of students showed up about an hour later. And I'm in a very, very small town. We don't have the RCMP here, or paramedics and first
Mm-hmm.
responders. So by the
Mm-hmm.
time we had that kind of support, the students were already there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a very tragic event, and it was a crazy day. And the next day, so we stayed at school. I look back at that and I find it so crazy now to think about it, but we spent the rest of the day at school. There were counselors that had come in for the rest of the day for to support our students and our staff. And the next day we walked back into that school. The day after that too, like it just, life kind of continued as normal as possible after that, but it was definitely not normal. Something had definitely changed in me.
Mm-hmm.
I spent the next few years, I didn't really think about what had happened. I decided that it was easier for me to ignore what happened, and I didn't let myself go there. I didn't let myself go back to that day. But
Mm-hmm.
I did become very hyper aware of how my other students were feeling. I was noticing what they were, what they weren't telling me, what they were telling me, what their body language was telling me.
Right.
And I had,
Remind us what age your students are or were at that
uh,
time.
I taught, so it's a very small school. There are only a little bit over 100 students from pre-K to 12.
Wow.
So yeah, very, very small community. So my students, I had students in elementary, 5, 6, like grade 5, 6, about 12 years old. And then I had students, most of my classes were with older students, my grade 10, 11, 12, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Yeah, I spent the most time with them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I started to focus a lot on my students, and because they had gone through this tragic event too, and they were
Mm-hmm.
forever changed in different ways after that day. And I I was
So
gonna
they were sort of stunned also, right? So no one's really saying anything, no one's talking about anything. It happens, and people sort of just, well, let's just pretend nothing happens. Is that so? They were acting like you were feeling too, like, okay, let's just get through the day, and this trauma has happened, but you're sort of just in this very numb
oh
state.
yeah.
Is that right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would say for sure. I think there was a deep shock. No one knew what to do. No one knew what was the right thing to say, what was the
Yeah.
right thing to say.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know if this is me, this is my thought, but I feel like suicide is a different level of um, discomfort.
Yes.
It's not the same as losing someone in a car accident, for instance, and that is,
Right.
I'm not taking it's
Yeah.
tragic. They're both tragic, but I feel like
Right.
suicide, we don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We don't know what the right thing
Exactly.
Well,
to say is and
the
what not
Right.
to say.
yeah, the term that comes up, and we talked about this before, is the term shame, right?
Mhm.
So there's not only the tragedy and the hurt and the trauma, but there's a whole level of shame around it. So for the child who killed himself, excuse me, for the parent, of course,
Right.
and probably even the teachers too. Like, how could we let this
Absolutely.
happen? Right?
Yeah.
Everyone's feeling some level of responsibility.
Mhm.
And Marci and I study a lot around energy and wavelengths and all the sort of the science around that. And shame is the lowest level frequency of any feeling that there is.
Mm,
So it
Yeah.
is a
I
different
believe
thing.
that. Yes.
Very different. Yes.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's not something that we can explain.
Mm-mm.
You know, we can ask why as often as we want, but we'll never really know why. And I think that,
Right.
you know, it can drive you kind of crazy. Even for myself, as this teacher, after it happened, I also went through, you know, like I questioned some of the things that happened. What could I have done differently?
Right.
You know, yeah, and I understood suicide. I felt like I understood it maybe better than my students did, because I was an adult, and unfortunately it wasn't the first time we had a suicide in our community. But I still wondered about, you know, why
Right.
it happened.
Mhm.
And I imagine all my students did the same. And
Yeah.
there really isn't an answer.
No.
Uh, so yeah, you described it perfectly. It was a shock, and we didn't know what to do and how to go about it.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that, which I think was very prevalent for a long time, but I think we're just starting to really understand and try to unlearn, is the idea that if you talk about it, you might trigger someone else to do it,
Mhm.
which is proven false. You know, people need to talk about it. We've had a friend of ours, Yuli Lagakis, who is a professor and she worked on a suicide call-in line for many years. So she has a lot of training about that. And so a lot of the things that our society has kind of told us, don't talk about it, don't put the idea there, is the absolute opposite. You need to ask the question, and then talk about it afterwards, and then let other people talk about it. But, until we
Mhm.
know these things,
Mhm.
we do the best we can. But,
Yeah. And
yeah,
it is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Too.
yes.
I felt like I didn't want, there is a chapter, I call it the heartbeat of my book, because it is the chapter on mental health.
Mm,
And I do go into the story, the what happened with
yeah.
my student in 2015. And I didn't really hesitate about that chapter. I didn't think,
Mm,
oh, maybe I shouldn't put it in the book because it's too touchy. It might trigger someone. I needed to
yeah.
have that chapter in the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I don't write about what I imagine he went through, because I have no idea. I
Right.
address it from my perspective in the
Yes.
book. And I go and I talk about how after it happened, I went through different periods, like when especially in the first few days after it happened, I remember getting angry at him, uh,
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
and just not really understanding, and
Yeah.
I was so mad that
Yeah.
and I understand. I did so much research afterwards, because I needed to understand a
Right.
little bit more, and it's really not like that. It's not like he was weak, and
Of course not.
he tried
Yeah.
to find the easy way out. It is not like that at all.
Right.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit in
Right.
that chapter.
And yet you still, you and all of his classmates and his family and everyone still gets to have their reactions and their feelings. And you
Yeah.
do have to
Mhm.
go through, all of the, it's almost cliche, the stages of grief, but
Yeah.
it's based on
Yeah.
science as well, what you
Yeah.
have to go through to process this enormous trauma. And it's so compounded by the fact that you were right there. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't imagine how
Mhm.
difficult that would be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that trauma is profound. As you mentioned this, I was thinking about something that happened in my own life. There was I was working in a cardiology department. This was 20, 30 years ago. And there was a young woman who was working there with me, and her son had been staying with some friends down in the Bay Area and had got a hold of a gun and shot
Mhm.
himself accidentally. But
Mhm.
the blood curdling screams that came from her as she collapsed onto the floor is etched in my brain for the rest of my life. And that's the reason I cannot be around guns. I cannot have any guns in the
Mhm.
house. I can't be around them.
Yeah.
And so, but that for you to witness the mother
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
what she must have been going through in that moment.
Mhm.
So it's not just the child and what you're going through, but it's all of it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
everyone. It's a collective trauma, right?
Mhm.
That you all are feeling, and
Mhm.
you're trying to be responsible now, right? You're trying to
Mhm.
hold the weight of all of that.
Yeah.
So you don't have the opportunity to process yourself because you're
Right.
carrying it
Yeah.
for everyone in that
Yeah,
moment,
that's what I
right?
felt. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, there was that. There was the sound. I can relate to that sound. Never not being able to forget that sound and what it
Yes.
does to you after you hear it. Because for years afterwards, if I heard anything close to that sound, my entire body would go cold, and then I would break
Yes.
out into a sweat, and sometimes I would collapse on the floor, like it was just too much,
Yes.
too
Mhm.
quickly.
Yes.
And there was the mother being in the school that was also very very difficult. And then there were my students.
Yeah.
They their eyes, like I feel like I'll never forget the way they looked at me after that. The way it was almost like they were pleading for
Yeah.
answers that I couldn't give, and it was, yeah,
Yes.
it was a lot for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we know what you're describing with your reaction to the sound is PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
which, I'm hoping and knowing that you had some help with that later. But
Yeah.
also, as you were telling your story, I think we're kind of getting to the point of how you began to process that and how the book came about. So
Mm-hmm.
say
Yeah.
more about that. We'd like to
Yeah.
hear how that
Yeah.
kind of unfolded.
Okay. Yeah. So the next few years, I kept going to work, and I tried to forget what happened as much as possible,
Mhm.
until 2018, when unfortunately there was another suicide in my community. It was a former student,
Mhm.
who is now an adult, and he was my best friend's brother.
Yeah.
And when that happened, everything that I hadn't processed, I feel like it came back, and I
Yeah.
was faced with it again, and I really had no choice. I had to do something, because I knew that it wasn't healthy to hide those feelings again, and
Right.
ignore them.
Mhm.
So I almost immediately decided that I was going to focus more on self-care. And one of those things was, I was lucky enough to be, I've always been very interested in personal growth. Um, is I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I read a lot of
Mhm.
books, a lot of nonfiction books on,
Mhm.
on how to better take care of yourself. And I
Yes.
love anything to do with
Self-help.
manifesting, and like you even talked about
Yes.
vibrations, and I love all of that. So
Mhm.
I decided I was going to start journaling. And I had
Mhm.
dabbled in journaling before, but I took it a lot more serious. I woke up early every morning, and I would journal, and I didn't journal about what had happened. I wrote my gratitude list down, and I focused on where I was heading, and it was all very, very positive. And it felt great. I felt like I
Mm.
was I felt a lot more grounded when I did that. My days seemed to go
Yes.
a lot smoother. And looking back, I can understand why now. Like that's how I started my morning. And then I was going to work in the school that didn't really feel safe. And this was all through therapy that I've been able to kind of make these links
Right.
between,
Yes.
everything. But I was going back
Yes.
to a place that wasn't really safe, but I didn't know. I just continued to do business as usual. But I
Mhm.
think my morning practice, my journaling, helped me feel grounded before going to my workplace, and everything kind of just felt better. And then a few months late after that, when my journaling practice was really, it was a, how do you say that? Like I did it every day, every
Yeah.
work day. I would
Just
wake up
part of
every day.
your
Yeah, it was
life,
part of my
part of how
routine.
you
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I decided I needed to work on something, be creative. My journal was, for me, it was a very personal thing. I
Mhm.
continued to do that, but I want to spend some time doing something creative. And I started to write. And I was writing to my students,
Mm.
but I was never planning on anyone seeing it. It was not going to be a book. That was not what I was thinking.
Mhm.
At the time. I would just wake up, I would do my journaling, I would grab my laptop, I would sit in the corner of my couch, and I would add words to this document, and I kept going to the same document and adding more things, and it was really a big mess of thoughts.
That's what journaling is supposed to be, by the
Yes,
way.
yes. It was a really big mess.
Filter-free.
Yes. Filter-free
Yeah.
thoughts, Phil. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that for an entire year.
Wow.
And at the end of that year, towards the end of that year, I started to get this thought. It would come and go, and it was like a little whisper telling me,
Yes.
maybe I have a book, maybe this could be a book, maybe I should publish. And then I would ignore it. And then
As we do.
Yeah, as we do. Yeah.
The
That
ego.
fear,
Yeah, like,
that
oh, it'll
fear
never
gets
be good
in.
enough. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And then it just kept getting louder, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I decided I needed to publish it. This was just before COVID.
Mm.
Well, yes, more or less before COVID, a few months before. I decided I was going to publish it. I have two amazing sisters who allowed me to send them a chapter at a time. So that they could give me feedback, and because they're my sisters, they gave me very honest feedback. They didn't care about my feelings. So we kind of worked like that for a few months until I had a kind of a second draft. I had chapters finally. I didn't really have chapters when I was just writing, before deciding to publish. And then COVID hit. Everything kind of stalled. I started a new job. My brain power, I didn't really have any brain power left for writing. So there was kind of a 2.5 year pause in my publishing journey.
You and everyone else.
Yeah.
we're all just sort of
the
stuck
weird
in the mud
time
for a couple of years,
Yes.
right?
So that's very true. It was a very weird time for everyone.
Yes.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was the end of 2022, and I kept hearing about how we were kind of in a post-COVID mental health crisis, especially our teenagers. And here I was sitting on this book, and I wasn't really doing anything with it. And that kind of pushed me to complete it and to finish the publishing journey. So in January 2023, so just the beginning of this year, I started working with someone who helps authors self-publish. And after that, it felt like a very quick process. I hired an editor, and we worked on the cover page and everything. And in August, my book was officially on the shelves. So yeah.
Wow, that's
Bravo.
amazing. Yes,
Bravo.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Bravo. So I'm curious about a couple of things. So number one, so being that this has happened in your school now, are there processes in place for this type of thing now? Is there any suicide training? Is there a place for discussion, like that sort of thing? Are there counselors in your schools now?
Yes, that is a great question, and I won't be able to give you the most correct answer because I'm not sure about certain things. My my school division spreads throughout the entire province because we're the only French school division, the only Francophone school division, which is different than French immersion anyway. So we are spread out across the entire province. And yes, we do have counselors. Every school has a counselor. We do have our older students, the grade 11 and 12, so our 17, 18-year-old students do what it's called Safe Talk. I don't know if they have that where you are.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a suicide awareness training. I've done it a couple times. We do have staff members who follow another suicide training. We have, I think that the goal is to have at least a couple people in every school with that training.
Mm-hmm.
And for the supports, I'm not going to talk specifically about my school division, but I do know that we have a lack of support just in general, not just in schools, but everywhere. Our mental health resources are lacking. We don't have enough. So yeah, we do feel it. We do feel it in our schools, because our kids can't have access to a counselor on demand. They have to, there's often a long wait period, and sometimes years. I think they say something like there's one psychiatrist for every 3,000 students or something like that. I can't remember if it's a psychiatrist or anyway, it's we don't have enough. We don't have enough resources.
That's a familiar story.
Yeah, that's not just a Canadian thing, by the way. We have similar issues here, and that's why I'm just curious about that, not to call anyone out for sure.
Yeah, and that idea that kids have to make appointments with therapists on campus, that you have a wellness room, but the whole idea of the wellness room was meant to be a place where you go when you're in that state of overwhelm. But I know in a lot of our schools, there's a pushback against, because there's a fear of them missing too much school and, disrupting the class, whatever, which, those can all be valid valid issues. But at the same time, the wellness room is there to help them learn that, when I'm in this state, I need to deal with it. I need to not just push it down or not, shut down, or all the things that, we're just inadvertently taught because that's what people do. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's something that's frustrated Debbie and I for a long time, because we want to help with these wellness rooms, help bring our tools, things like, you talk about the journaling as a tool, or that's meditation. All of these things that people can do to calm in that moment is what we're passionate about. So
yes. Well, I after our first meeting, I immediately went and checked out your website. I love everything you do. I think it's fantastic, and it is true. Unfortunately, there is a pushback. It's hard to make big changes like that. But it is important for sure.
Exactly. It is important. And, we get used to doing things a certain way, and we just can get an idea that you can't, this is how we do it. And that just doesn't work anymore. It's time to kind of up in the whole cart and build some new systems, I think. So.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we are the Warrior Parent Podcast, and I know you're a mom. And so talk a little bit about your own kids and your own journey, given the things that you've experienced and witnessed in your own life, and what you see for your kids and the generations coming forward.
Oh, that's a big question. So I have 3 kids. My oldest is 14. She'll be 15 in a few months. And then they're all about 2 years apart. So I've always said that at every age, this is the best age. This is the best age. And now I'm saying it again. This is the best age.
Yes.
I just love everything about being a parent.
What about, because you're kind of a parent of your students as well. And I believe you're not at the school anymore. That's correct, right? You especially, you kind of alluded to this, but was your therapist who kind of pointed out that this wasn't a safe place anymore. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you made that change, but then also those students, they're kind of your kids too. And how did they end up processing that? Did you see shifts, and what were you able to do? Because I know that was on your heart.
And our students, because of how small our school is, some of these students, I know my students from the time they enter preschool, and I start teaching them, sometimes in 3rd grade all the way to grade 12. So they do become your kids.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I know because of the how concerned I became after the suicide happened, how hyper aware I became of how my students were.
Yeah.
I would ask them, and I noticed subtle hints. The student you ask, how's it going? How are you? And
Yeah.
there's that split second hesitation before they say good. I would
Mm.
always ask again. And
Nice.
more often than not, they would take, a deep breath and say, oh, this happened this morning, or
Mm.
I'm really struggling with this. And then, I would invite them to have a conversation about it. And these aren't students, they weren't processing the suicide. This is,
Just
years
life.
later.
In
Yeah.
general.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Well, it
just
doesn't go
generally.
away.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like the big pink elephant that in the room that, everyone just sort of walked around, right? But it
Yes.
still
And
is lingering in everyone's
mhm,
cells and everyone's
yeah.
being.
And I think at the time, I blocked everything out. I
Yeah.
couldn't even tell you how the students
Mm,
processed it because I don't know. I don't know if they
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
I it was kind of, we were all forced to do life as though nothing happened. And
Yes.
I don't know how they carried that. I don't know what
Yeah.
it was like in their homes. I don't know how they slept at night. I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I hope they're doing okay now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm imagining the work that you've done, the journaling you've done, the book
Yeah.
that you've published. Hopefully, they will all be able to access it and
Mhm.
can do some healing through your work, right? And
Yeah.
feeling like, you know what, this was one of my teachers, and they're feeling, proud and empowered by
Mhm.
what you've done, and that little thing can allow them to open up themselves and go, whoa, to reflect and take a look at their own selves and think, wow, my teacher did this, and maybe I need to do a little work around this too.
Mhm. That is
Yeah.
my hope. The book is actually dedicated to those students.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a love letter to your students because you're giving them all these tools. And I love that.
Mhm.
Um, I do want to show the book, which is that backwards. Yeah, it's going to be
No.
backwards, but it's so beautiful. And I
It's
haven't had a chance to
beautiful.
read it yet because I just, we recently met Melanie and I ordered it after that. But I did find this one part at the beginning where you give a little advice. This is, I'm sorry. Can you hear my dog barking?
No.
No.
Good. Okay. So on page 7, you give them a little bit of advice to take risks, take chances, allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to grow, allow yourself to change, become the most amazing version of you unapologetically. I love that. And I think that, so you kind of started on this, but say more about how kids could use this, or how the book ended up being sort of this almost how-to book, or
Mm.
supporting
Yeah.
teens.
Well, you know what? This is the book I would have needed as a teenager, and I
Mm,
I know I realize that now. Now that it's
mm,
written, and I feel like that's what I would have needed. I chose 14 hard topics to discuss in the book,
yeah.
and they are common challenges teenagers go through.
Mhm.
They're not. There's one chapter on mental health, but health. The other ones are, they vary. There's, I talk about friendships, and I talk about body image, and
Hmm.
romantic relationships that are sometimes hard, and
Yeah.
uh, what I want. And I don't, my book, I made sure, because there are a lot of really great books for teens out there, a lot of nonfiction self-help books for teens. There are a lot of really great
Mm.
ones.
Hmm.
But I tried to stay away from being too, I didn't want it to seem like a researched project, like
Yeah. Hmm.
I didn't want it to seem like I was just giving statistics and,
Yeah.
a 3-step, guide to getting through all these hard things. It's not like that at all.
Mm.
My goal was to write a book that would inspire teenagers to trust themselves And I like that you quoted that one part of the book, because it summarizes exactly what I'm hoping they get out of it. I hope they know that it's okay to fail. These 14 hard things, they're hard things, but it means not, it doesn't mean anything about who they are. They, you know, you go through this challenge and you become stronger through this challenge, and and it's okay. And it's okay if you stumble as you're going through this challenge. It's okay if you fail. I think it's important to fail. I think it's important to go through hard things. And you do become stronger, and you have something special to bring once you're on the other side of that. There's something, you know, there's something special that you bring to others who are going through a challenge. And if you allow yourself to fail, you allow other people to fail. If you allow yourself to grow, you allow other people to grow. And that's what I hope teenagers get out of it. It is not, I wanted the book to be very relatable. The stories are there so that teen readers can relate to the stories. Every chapter is divided into 2 parts. The first part is a story. The second part is kind of the takeaways and some of my own personal stuff I've been through, or stuff my, you know, some of my closest friends and family have been through, or some of my students, without naming anyone. It's all very confidential. And I hope through those stories that my readers kind of discover their own. I hope they interpret it in a way that feels good to them. I don't tell them how. I don't tell them how to think, but I do give them things to think about. And I even encourage, I don't know if it's written in the book, I can't remember. I don't know where I wrote this or where I said this. It might be in the book, but I even hope teenagers will question some of the things I write in the book. They don't have to agree with what's in the book. I hope they question it, and I hope they question it with their parents, and they discuss certain things with their parents or their teachers or their friends. They don't have to agree with everything that's written in the book, but I do hope I give them things to think about.
Plant some seeds. I want to ask you about you talk about the stories. Are these stories that you come up with, or are these actual people, or what are the stories?
So the stories are inspired by true stories, but I never, in the first part of the chapters, when I tell the story, I don't say who it is. It's kind of just a fictional person that I've made up, but they are inspired by true stories. And some of them are my own, some of them are, but you'd never be able to say who I'm talking about. Some of the more delicate topics, like my chapter 8, which is on mental health, where I do talk about the suicide. I did have quite a few conversations with the student's mother, and she knows what was said and agreed to it. And some of the other stories too, I have permission. But nothing is too delicate, I don't think.
You handled it with grace and with concern for those involved, which is important. But I think what I was going to say is that stories are so often how we learn and how we connect. So it's beautiful to use them.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm feeling so inspired. I think I need to go finish my book.
Yes, you do.
I have a long way to go. I got chapter 1, and that would just about suck the life right out of me. But you've inspired me to do so. I think we're running out of time. But Melanie, it's been wonderful having this time with you, and we're super proud of you for the work that you're doing, for putting yourself out there and being authentic and having courage to tell the stories.
So tell people how can they get the book? How can they find out more about you? I know you have a website. Share a little bit about that if you would.
Okay, sure. My website is just my name, melaniegareau.ca. CA because I'm in Canada. I have an Instagram and Facebook page. They're both the same, melg.author. And the book is available on Amazon worldwide, and in the States, you can get it on the Barnes & Noble website. In Canada, Indigo has it on their website, and people can order the book through my website too. The book would come from me, and that's for people who would like a signed copy.
Oh, I should have done that.
Oh,
I ordered it from Amazon, but what a great,
yeah,
that's
Amazon
great.
works fine too.
Yes, but I love signed copies. That's a
Oh.
lovely way to personalize it. That's
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very
wonderful.
much.
Yes, thank you, Melanie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools. And through a special partnership with Donna Appadoni, we have created a group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Here's Donna.
I think of how we fight to get through these times. How fear makes us fierce. How adversity makes us warriors. We keep going beyond what feels possible. Hi, I'm Donna Appadoni. I'm the person who writes and produces meditations for Core Experience. This meditation is all about surrender. In this particular case, surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means getting out of your own way. Put aside what you think you should do and let yourself feel what's the right thing to do, what's best for you, what does your gut tell you, what advances your purpose in the world. Go in that direction. It's a good way to be. Remember, whatever's happening with you, you can do anything you set your mind to do. My submission, the mission that is one layer deeper. Something I am called to do. I listen. I say yes.
Donna's book, called Drive Time Meditations, is a collection of 183 of her purpose-driven motivators. Drive Time Meditations is available on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at coreexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Appadoni with music from Scott Holmes. The full collection of meditations is in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, available on Amazon and at donnaappadoni.com. Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Core Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.